Now more than ever before is it clear that the choices we make have a direct bearing on our environment. Whether it's your government's reliance on burning fossil fuel to produce electricity, to our own everyday decisions, our contribution to landfill, or the size and age of the car we choose to drive, everything has a certain cost to the environment. It's actually very rare that we do anything positive for the environment outside repairing the damage we've already done. What we tend to call good for the environment are actually measures to reduce our impact on the environment. That's not to say there's no merit in reducing our environmental impact. Unfortunately, though, there's not too many good things we do for the environment, but using less electricity is a positive start. The equation is simple. If you reduce your daily demand for electricity, which is usually generated through the burning of fossil fuels, that's so many less cubic metres of waste gases being sent into the atmosphere, which over your lifetime is a significant reduction. If the government in your part of the world is slow to look at alternative methods of electricity generation, then this is one way you can make a difference independently. Again, this is not so much good for the environment as it is about you doing less damage to the environment. This can be achieved by designing your home to use less energy in heating and cooling. Less energy consumption means lower electricity bills, another benefit of something called climate-sensible design. The principles of climate-sensible design are simple and involve planning the home to work with its surrounding environment in order to keep the home cool in summer and warm in winter. An ideally designed home capitalising on its climatic conditions will reduce indoor temperature deviation so that the need to heat and cool by artificial means will be minimised and even cancelled out altogether in some environments. Based in Western Australia, architect Gary Baverstock has specialised in climate-sensible design for over 25 years. Baverstock says the basics can be applied in every climate, but the parameters will change according to the characteristics of that climate.
Climate-sensible design can be applied to anywhere on this planet. Where the climates are hot and cold, then artificial means are needed as boosting systems. But basically, yes, climate-sensible design can have advantages anywhere on this planet.
If these design principles are so simple, why do these ideas seem so fresh to homeowners and so underutilised by many building industries around the world?
The main barrier for climate-sensible design has been, and still is, lack of knowledge, lack of awareness of what can be achieved. People are hearing about it, but they're not actually conversant with how to go about it and do it properly.
This lack of widespread awareness of these design principles is something Baverstock has been actively remedying in his hometown for over 2 decades. His regular workshops on the subject have seen many cycles of enthusiasm for climate-sensible design, and through his direct education and advisory services, Baverstock has influenced the planning of over 300 homes incorporating these design elements.
For the first timers at the course, they see it as a revelation. They generally come along with a general interest in climate-sensible design. They believe that it should be done, but they don't realise what can be achieved and what the impact can be on the environment, the community, and their own comfort and their own energy bills.
Baverstock is also a very active campaigner for educating the next generation of architects about the principles and how to apply them effectively. So what are these climate-sensible design principles? Well, there are 5 basic principles, and their order of priority really depends on the climate to which they're being applied. For the moment, we'll prioritise and apply them to the Southern Hemisphere temperate climate in which Gary Baverstock designs many of his houses here in Perth, Western Australia. The temperate climate could best be described as Mediterranean, plenty of sunlight all year round, dry and warm to hot in summer, and moderate rainfall in winter. The overall aim is to keep the interior cool in summer, when outside temperatures can reach in excess of 40 degrees Celsius, while at the same time retaining the heat from the winter sun, when the mercury can dip to 0. Sounds like an impossible task, but it can be done, and very effectively too. Many of Baverstock's clients have recorded just a 10-degree deviation in temperature all year round, no matter how cold or hot it is outside. The first principle to consider is house orientation to best utilise the sun's path from dawn to dusk. Taking into account Perth's latitude and the sun's higher zenith in summer than winter, houses here are best built with a northern orientation. In summer, the western and eastern walls will be the hottest, while in winter, it's the northern wall that will retain the most heat. It makes sense then to keep windows to a minimum in the western and eastern walls where the summer sun will shine directly inside, heating up the home early in the day in the case of the eastern windows. Instead, the northern wall should have a large area of glass to take advantage of the winter sun, the time of year when you want to warm the house. In this temperate climate, that ratio of window area is high. Around 52% of the total northern facade is recommended, and to restrict heat loss on the opposite side of the house, windows should only make up 10% of the southern facade. Now, while the east and west walls are the hottest in summer, roof overhang or eaves will provide enough shade for those windows, but that won't be enough for the north wall to completely escape exposure. In order for this wall and its many windows to be utilised as a heat conductor in winter without letting in heat during summer, a solar veranda on the northern side of the house is a must. Now, this is a solar veranda. As you can see, these slats are angled in such a way that in winter, when the sun's travelling a fairly low path, they let in around 80% of the available sunlight to shine on these windows, warming up the house. Now, in summer, of course, the sun is travelling a much higher path, so these slats completely shade the windows, keeping the house cool. Very clever. Now, if you want to take that principle even further, then a solarium along the northern wall is a very effective way to collect and store warm air via these windows or upper level vents. It's not a new concept. The English have been using it for years, except they called them conservatories. Of course, windows in the northern wall should be positioned to take as much advantage of the sun's other natural resource, light. Not only is the sun a much more effective light source than artificial lighting, it's much cheaper. In fact, it's free. Now, obviously, it's only available during daylight hours, a time when most activity in the home happens in the living areas, so it's a good idea to concentrate as many of these living areas as possible on the northern side of the home because of its many windows. Another important design factor to remember is that in a climate-sensible home, the best possible northern-facing wall is completely straight without any protruding sections. Now, that's quite a limiting factor in home design, so just be sure that any protruding sections don't project too far so as to partially block windows from the sun in other parts of that northern wall. That being the case, when you're selecting land for your home in a temperate climate, it's best if the block has its back or side yard facing north, because it's always nice if there's a bit of privacy for both your indoor living area and your outdoor entertaining area under the solar veranda here. Climate-sensible designed homes are by nature very open-planned, so a well-placed skylight can also brighten up a number of living areas during daylight hours. We'll look more closely at that open-planned characteristic after we've checked out a concept called thermal mass. If we think of the windows as the heat-collecting facilitators of the house, then the solid materials, the walls and the slab on which the home is built, are selected for their thermal mass qualities. Thermal mass is the ability to absorb, store and then slowly radiate heat, so good thermal mass capability results in a much more stable temperature range indoors. In this temperate climate, heavyweight materials like concrete or bricks are the best option because they store up to 20 times more heat than lightweight materials such as timber or plasterboard, which also tend to heat and cool quickly. Inside, adding solid, dark-coloured floors in the northern areas of the home beneath the large window areas is another practical way to use this principle of thermal mass to absorb, collect and radiate heat from the winter sun in the cooler months. A moment ago we saw how effective a skylight can be in naturally brightening the living areas in climate-sensible homes because of their propensity to being open-planned. Now, this happens to be another very important climate-sensible design principle, cross-ventilation, taking advantage of the breezes during different times on a summer's day to cool the house down. This principle is another factor that affects window placement and also determines the location of doors in your home's design. Where possible, there should be 2 windows in a room to allow fresh air to flow through. In terms of the house as a whole, drafts can be directed from one end to the other through sensible design. Of course, cross-ventilation will only work with the participation of those living in the house, and that means being aware of local breeze patterns and opening and closing windows accordingly. In summer, this concept is most effective after sunset, when night ventilation can cool the thermal mass of the house to within 1 degree of the outdoor temperature. Combine this with the home's ability to maintain a much cooler temperature at the hottest part of the day, and you won't need air conditioning. Effective ventilation is also very important up there in the attic space. Of course, heat rises, and in summer it would get very hot up there if there was no means for the collected heat to escape. So a couple of strategically placed solar chimneys is an ideal way to cool the house down at night. While we're in the attic, let's look at the importance of effective insulation and how it helps to maintain stable indoor temperatures. Insulation is a major player in keeping a house cool in summer and warm in winter. How? By slowing down heat transfer from hot to cool areas. In this temperate climate, insulation with a thermal resistance rating of 2 is recommended for the roof and R1 insulation for the wall cavities. Other measures can also be taken to complement the solar design principles. In this temperate climate, having the roof pitched up to 30 degrees allows for maximum exposure to the sun for solar collection panels on the northern faces of the roof for a solar hot water system or solar cells for in-house electricity generation. Well, there you have it, a very quick summary of the 5 principles at a very basic level. You and your family won't change the world, but once your climate-sensible home is built, you will make a tangible difference without even trying and save a lot in electricity costs along the way. Now, while the whole concept of utilising the climatic conditions to your advantage is so stupendously simple, everything we've discussed so far is an exact science. For instance, when we suggested 52% of a home's northern wall here in Perth should be window area, it wasn't a random figure. That ratio was a precise solar calculation based on factors such as the sun's path, the optimum comfort temperature indoors all year round in relation to the temperate climate, and so on. Even the slats in this solar veranda are set at exactly 35 degrees to best utilise the sun's path in winter. Of course, they would be set at a different angle if we were at another latitude on the globe. Each principle has its own formula to allow you to take full advantage of them in the unique climate and weather conditions of your part of the world. Now, in the mid-1980s, Gary Baverstock and his colleague Sam Paolino published this book called Low Energy Buildings in Australia. This clever pair of experts have made things very easy for those of us building a house here in Australia because they went ahead and used the various formulas for factors such as heat transfer, thermal balance and heat gain to come up with the optimum measurements, dimensions and ratios for all the principles. They didn't just calculate them for north-facing houses in every climatic region, they published figures for whichever way your house is orientated, so I can quote the optimum glass area of each wall of a north-east-facing 2-storey house being built in Sydney, for instance. There's bound to be a similar publication and statistics available in your part of the world. If not, the formulae in this book do apply globally. The point I'm trying to make is that solar design principles are universal. Their priorities change, though, according to the geographical location of the building concerned. If you're building in Australia, this book of constructional values and formulae for Australian locations is available by going to the Solar E website. Also at this website are contact details for climate-sensible specialists in your part of the world who can help you make the most of the climate you're living in. Keep watching now to see how other extreme climates around the globe affect home design. The Winifred is a low-cost 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom floor plan drawn up by Baverstock exactly to the recommended formula and was built as a demonstration home in Western Australia. Over the last 10 years, it has been constantly evaluated and overall the house has proved to be functional, cheap to run and comfortable, with a year-round temperature deviation of just 10 degrees Celsius. You're about to see how this floor plan and its construction methods change outside the Mediterranean climate. Being in the Northern Hemisphere, our home would have a southern orientation, and because of temperature extremes most of the year, very hot during the day but sub-zero at night, our southern wall facing the winter sun would only be 25% glass. For good thermal mass, we'd build on a concrete slab, but its edges will be insulated to cope with the fluctuating ground temperatures in summer and winter. In most desert regions of the world, the pitch of the roof will be quite low to minimise the space for heat collection in the roof cavity and will be lined with R3 insulation. For Arizona, roof pitches can be higher because of the higher latitude. Also, to make sure there are regular air changes, roof ventilation is a necessity. With so many hours of sun over the year, you'd be silly not to have a solar hot water system. In fact, you'd quickly recoup your solar panel installation costs if you generated your own electricity. Pergolas and plenty of greenery around the house will keep the heavy mass walls cooler. Of course, the southern wall will have a solar veranda for the benefit of winter sun. Any supplementary cooling can be provided by an evaporative cooler in very hot locations. A cold alpine climate will certainly have a dramatic effect on our home design. Being in Switzerland, the winter sun still shines on the southern side, but we really need to take advantage of the available sunlight, obviously much less than in Arizona. One of the main contributors to cold indoor conditions is the freezing ground temperature, so the slab will have to sit on insulation with a heat resistance rating of 4 to really keep the heat in. As much of the southern wall as possible should be windows, at least 70%, but while we're using the heat collection properties of glass to full advantage, it will escape just as quickly at night when the cold sets in, so all windows must be double layered and well sealed. A solarium on the southern wall, also double glazed, will add even more heat collection potential to the home, while the wall opposite the winter sun facade, in this case the northern side, will have as few windows as possible, again to keep heat loss to a minimum. The roof should be built at a steep pitch so it won't collapse under the weight of collected snow, and lined inside with heavy-duty R4 to R6 insulation. Although we want to stay warm inside, we don't want to fall asleep during waking hours on account of the house being stuffy, so installing a fresh air heat exchanger along with a low-cost central heating system is a good idea. Yes, this will require electricity or gas, but again, the climate-sensible design of the home means the central heating system will be used much more efficiently. The tropical climate is both hot and humid with just 2 seasons rather than 4, the dry and the wet monsoonal seasons. This brings a completely different set of variables to climate-sensible home design. In a location so close to the equator, windows on all sides should be small with 100% shading where possible by solid shade verandas, landscaping and gardens. The insulated walls should be constructed from light mass materials. An R4 insulated parasol roof is recommended with permanent ridge ventilation, and good airflow through the house itself is a must, so careful door and window placement to make the most of breezes should be complemented with ceiling fans. Isolating one sector of the house to be air conditioned should also be considered in the case of excessively humid locations. Now that was climate-sensible design being applied in 4 different climates. Plenty of examples of the choices you have to turn these good ideas and good science into action. Again, the benefits from a bit of planning and lateral thinking are a 60 to 90% reduction in energy bills, natural instead of artificial comfort in your home for longer periods. Your reduced demand for electricity means less government expenditure on power stations, which also translates to between 6 and 30 tonnes less carbon dioxide being produced each year. Log on to solare.com to find out how you can apply these principles in more detail and to purchase publications to help you make the most of climate-sensible design. Or consult your local climate-sensible professional for further advice.